Good day, my name is Lloyd and this video is a project that discusses iterative statements. Now what are iterative statements? Well, in Java, iterative statements are control flow statements that allow you to execute a block of code repeatedly. Iterative statements are used for repetitive tasks such as iterating over elements in an array, processing data until a certain condition is met, or implementing loops with a specific number of iterations. They provide a way to make code more concise and readable for scenarios that involve repetition. Now the first of these loops is the while loop. The while loop repeats a statement while a given condition is true. It tests the condition before executing the loop body. As you can see in the screen, the code before the loop first states the value of an integer. This is important because the loop will use the integer in a statement and will check this statement before executing its code. As shown after a while, where the statement in the parentheses states that while I, which is the integer that equals 1, is lesser than or equal to 5, then the program will print out number colon plus I, which starts with 1 since the integer I is equal to 1. And after that, there is the I plus plus, which increments the integer I by 1. So the program then goes back to the top of the loop, but incremented by 1, meaning I is now 2. But it is still lesser than 5, so it will continue to execute the code until it is no longer lesser than or equal to 5. As you can see, when I executed the program, the loop continued to print out number column 1 all the way up to 5 and stopped there because the while loop statement has become false. Because at that point, I has been incremented to 6 and 6 is not less than or equal to 5, making the statement not true and therefore stopping the loop. The next loop after the while loop is the for loop. The for loop executes a sequence of statements multiple times and abbreviates the code that manages the loop variable, which means that while the while loop only has one statement, the for loop has a series of statements that make it less cluttered than the while loop. Now, if we would look at the code for the for loop, you would see that this code and the while loop code that I showed you earlier is almost completely identical. But the difference is that in the for loop, the statement of the integer value and the increment for the integer is in the same parentheses as the earlier I is less than or equal to 5. Doing it like this makes it look more clean than the while loop, right? And just like the while loop code from earlier, this for loop code also prints out number colon 1 up to the number 5, then stopping there again since it has incremented I to more than 5. Let me run the code to show you that they are similar. As you can see, I run the code and there. See, number column 1 all the way up to number column 5. Just the same as for the while loop, but much more cleaner. The last, but certainly not the least of the loops, is the do while loop. Just like a while statement, except that it tests the condition at the end of the loop body, which means that the program will loop and keep executing the do of the statement until the while of the statement is satisfied, in which case it will then perform the action inside the while loop and end the loop. As you can see on the screen, I've imported a scanner instance, I'll be using a scanner with this loop. The scanner will scan integer inputs from the user of the program. So when this code is executed, the do part of the loop will be executed first. It will print out, enter a number, and enter 0 to exit. It will then wait for the user to input any integer. Then it will print out, you entered, plus the number that you have entered. This loops again and again, unless you input the number 0, because in the while part of the loop statement, number is not equal to 0 has become false, which ends the do part of the loop, allowing while to execute and end the whole loop. Now I will execute the code to show you what I was talking about. See, I run and debug. Then the program asks you to enter a number. So when I enter 1, that see it prints out you entered 1, and it asks you again to enter a number. This repeats again and again as long as you input a number other than 0. But when I input the number 0, the loop is ended. This is loop exited. Thank you. And the, the do while loop has now been ended since the while loop condition has turned false. Now, there are ways to alter these loops to make it more complex and help the coder in writing more options in loops. And these are the loop control statements. In Java, loop control statements are used to control the flow of execution in loops. These statements help you determine when the loop should start, how it should proceed, and how it should end. When it should end. The main loop control statements in Java are break statements and continue statements. The break statement terminates the loop or switch statement and transfers execution to the statement immediately following the loop or switch. This means that when the conditions are met, the break statement instantly stops the loop it is located in and continues executing the code outside of the loop. As you can see, the code in the screen is the same as the code for the while loop and the for loop that I created earlier with a few minor changes. There is now a break condition. This states that if I is equal to 3, then it will print out breaking the loop at iteration 3, which then the loop is stopped. In the meanwhile, the loop will print out iteration 1 up to 3, and this line is skipped for I equals 3 and beyond, which is indeed skipped when the conditions of the break is satisfied. Let me show you by running my code to see if I'm actually correct. So I run it, and here, iteration 1, this line is skipped for I equals 3 and beyond. This keeps on being printed out, but then stops at iteration 3. It instead prints out breaking the loop at iteration 3, which is here the condition. This is because the condition was satisfied. So instead of printing out this line skip for I equals 3 and beyond, it instead prints out breaking the loop at iteration 3. And then with the break here, it stops the loop and goes to the final code, which is system out println loop finish, which prints out loop finish in the terminal. The final conditional loop statement is the continue statement. The continue statement causes the loop to skip the remainder of its body and immediately retests its condition prior to reiterating. It basically skips doing what the loop normally does and continues on the loop. As you can see in the code of the loop, it looks the same as the break statement. But instead of stopping the loop entirely, it skips one number, which in this case is 3. Let me show you by executing the code. See, I run the code and see the loop starts from 1, continues to 2, but then when it gets to 3 and it hits the continuous statement I equals to 3, instead of printing out iteration 3, it instead prints out skipping iteration 3 using continue. Then the loop continues on, iteration 4, iteration 5, where if this was a break statement, it would stop entirely. And then after the loop is done, it then prints out the loop is finished.